"Dad, look!" The little girl pointed out the housekeeper fiddling with the safe, and her note changed everything. Subscribe to the channel and comment on where you are watching from. The morning sun of March filtered through the linen curtains of the mansion in Maplewood, Chicago, creating golden patterns on the polished wooden floor. Lily, only 6 years old, ran barefoot through the spacious corridors of the house, her curly hair bouncing as she searched for the perfect hiding spot for another round of hide-and-seek. The girl had her late mother's lively brown eyes, but the stubborn determination of her father, a trait that often landed her in situations that tested the patience of the adults around her. The Johnson house was a reflection of the prosperity earned through decades of hard work in the construction industry. The spacious rooms were decorated with hardwood furniture, artworks by local artists, and family photographs that told the story of 3 generations of successful entrepreneurs. On the ground floor, Mr. Johnson's study occupied a prominent position. A large room with shelves filled with technical books, framed diplomas on the walls, and an imposing mahogany desk where he conducted important meetings and reviewed million-dollar contracts. On this particular morning, Lily had chosen to hide behind the living room curtains when she heard cautious footsteps in the hallway. Peeking through a crack, she saw Mrs. Thompson, the family's housekeeper for 8 years, walking with unusual discretion toward the study. The 52-year-old woman, always so confident in her domestic tasks, now showed an almost childlike hesitation. Her grey hair was neatly tied in a bun, as always, but her hands trembled slightly as she held a white envelope against her navy blue apron. "How strange," thought Lily, frowning just like her father when he was deep in thought. "Auntie doesn't go into the study when Dad isn't there." Mrs. Thompson had a face marked by time and work, but her dark brown eyes still sparkled with the determination that had brought her from a small town in Indiana to the Windy City in search of better opportunities. She was of average height, with calloused hands from domestic work and an always upright posture that betrayed the pride she maintained despite financial difficulties. A widow for 6 years, she raised 3 teenage children on her own. Sarah, 17, the oldest and studious, Jake, 15, passionate about soccer, and Emma, 13, dreamy and artistic like her mother. The housekeeper looked around before entering the study, checking if she was truly alone. Driven by the curiosity that always characterized her, Lily quietly slipped out from behind the curtains and approached the ajar door. The study smelled of leather and wood, a masculine and imposing aroma that always intimidated the girl when she needed to talk to her father about some mischief. The safe was hidden behind a painting by Edward Hopper, depicting the Chicago skyline that the family took great pride in. Mrs. Thompson knew the combination. Mr. Johnson had given her access 2 years ago when he needed to travel for a month to oversee a project in New York and left important company documents in her care. The trust placed in her had been a source of great pride and responsibility. 5291, she murmured softly, turning the numbers on the digital panel. The characteristic sound of the safe opening echoed discreetly in the study. Lily stretched her neck, trying to see better. She saw Mrs. Thompson carefully place the envelope among other important papers, next to the company documents and the house deeds. The housekeeper stood still for a few seconds, as if gathering courage or perhaps bidding farewell to something precious. "Oh, God, I hope I'm doing the right thing," she whispered, closing her eyes for a moment. "It's for my kids. Everything is for my kids." The safe was closed again, with the same care with which it had been opened. Mrs. Thompson replaced the painting in its original position, smoothed her apron, and took a deep breath before heading to the door. It was then that her eyes met Lily's, who hadn't managed to hide in time. "Lily, what are you doing here?" asked Mrs. Thompson, trying to keep her voice calm despite her evident shock. Her cheeks were slightly flushed, and she rubbed her hands on her apron in an attempt to disguise her nervousness. The girl froze for a moment, her eyes wide like a deer caught in the headlights of a car. She knew she had witnessed something she shouldn't have seen, even without fully understanding the significance of that moment. I was playing hide-and-seek, Aunt T," stammered Lily, twisting a strand of hair between her fingers. A nervous habit she had, developed since her mother's passing. "Hide-and-seek in your dad's study. You know you can't play here, dear," said Mrs. Thompson, trying to keep her reprimanding tone light despite the tension she felt. "Come on, let's go to the kitchen. It's time for your morning snack." As they walked down the hallway, Lily couldn't shake the image of Mrs. Thompson putting that envelope in the safe from her mind. There was something in the housekeeper's expression, a mix of determination and fear, that left the girl unsettled. "Aunt T," she asked, stopping suddenly in the middle of the hallway, "why did you put that paper in Dad's safe?" Mrs. Thompson felt her heart race. She knelt in front of the girl, placing her hands on her small shoulders with a tenderness she only showed to the Johnson children, whom she considered her own. "Sometimes, Lily, adults need to keep important things in safe places. That's all, dear. Don't worry about grown-up stuff," she explained, trying to sound convincing. "But you—" Lily was scared. "I saw you," she insisted with the brutal honesty typical of children. "You were shaking," Mrs. Thompson sighed deeply, struggling against the urge to tell the whole truth to the girl who had become so dear to her over the years. The envelope she had just hidden contained her savings from the last 6 months. Money saved penny by penny to pay for her daughter Sarah's college entrance exam registration and preparatory course materials. "Sometimes, my dear, doing the right thing makes us nervous, but that doesn't mean it's wrong," she finally said, kissing the girl's forehead. "Now let's have your hot chocolate before it gets cold." In the kitchen, while preparing Lily's morning snack, Mrs. Thompson felt the weight of the secret she had just hidden in the safe. It wasn't just money. It was hope materialized, the dream of seeing her eldest daughter become a doctor, the possibility of breaking the cycle of poverty that had haunted her family for generations. The sound of the key in the front door announced the arrival of Mr. Johnson. At 42, he maintained the imposing posture that had earned him respect in the Chicago business community. Tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair already sprinkled with silver strands, he always wore tailored suits that accentuated his leadership presence. His grey-blue eyes could be intimidating during negotiations, but became infinitely warm when he looked at his daughter. "Good morning, Teresa. Good morning, Princess," he greeted, kissing the top of Lily's head before heading to the study to grab some documents. Mrs. Thompson and Lily exchanged a quick glance, loaded with meaning that only the two of them understood at that moment. The secret was kept safe, protected by the walls of the safe and the shared silence between a determined housekeeper and a curious girl who had just witnessed the first chapter of a story that would forever change the dynamics of that home in the heart of Chicago. The days that followed the incident with the safe brought a subtle but noticeable change in the Johnson household routine. Lily found herself torn between the silent promise she had made to Mrs. Thompson and her growing curiosity about the mysterious envelope. During meals, she closely observed the housekeeper, noticing small details that had previously gone unnoticed. The way she checked the clock more frequently, how her eyes would dart away whenever Mr. Johnson mentioned the study, and especially how her hands trembled imperceptibly whenever someone spoke about money or responsibilities. On a rainy March afternoon, typical of Chicago's autumn, Lily was playing in her room when she heard raised voices coming from the kitchen. Curious as always, she quietly descended the marble stairs, sitting on the last step, where she could hear the conversation between her father and Mrs. Thompson. "I don't understand, Teresa. Mr. Johnson said, his voice laden with concern. "The electricity bill came in 40% higher this month. Are you sure you didn't leave any appliances on overnight?" "I'm sure, Mr. Johnson," Mrs. Thompson replied, her voice slightly higher than normal. "I always turn everything off before I leave. I've done that for the 8 years I've worked here." "And the pool heater? Could there be a problem with the automatic timer?" "I check it every day, sir. It's working fine." Mr. Johnson sighed, flipping through the papers in his hands. As an experienced businessman, he had developed a keen instinct for detecting inconsistencies, whether in financial spreadsheets or people's behavior. Something about Mrs. Thompson's demeanor bothered him, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what. "All right, Teresa. I'll have the electrician take a look at the installation next week," he concluded, still suspicious. Lily silently returned to her room, but the conversation echoed in her mind. That night, during dinner, she surprised her father with an unexpected question. "Dad, why do people keep secrets?" Mr. Johnson nearly choked on his wine. He set the glass down on the mahogany table and looked at his daughter with renewed attention. The dining room of the house, decorated with an Austrian crystal chandelier and gold-toned wallpaper, had always been the place where the family gathered for important conversations. "What an interesting question, Princess. Why do you want to know about that?" "At school, the teacher said that lying is wrong. But what about when we don't say something but we also don't lie? Is it the same thing?" Mrs. Thompson, who was serving dessert, felt her hands grow cold. The silver tray trembled slightly as she placed it on the sideboard. "Well," Mr. Johnson began, choosing his words carefully, "sometimes people keep secrets because they want to protect someone, other times because they're afraid others won't understand their decisions. And is that right or wrong? It depends on the reason, Lily. If the secret can hurt someone, then it's wrong. But if it's to protect or help, it can be understandable." Mrs. Thompson breathed a sigh of relief, interpreting her employer's words as a form of early absolution for her situation. She didn't know that Mr. Johnson had noticed her reaction, and that this observation would plant the first seeds of suspicion in his mind. The following week, Mr. Johnson began to pay closer attention to the details around the house. On a Saturday morning, while having coffee in the garden and reading the local newspapers, he noticed Mrs. Thompson cleaning the study windows with exceptional care. She was wiping the same spot several times, as if she were nervous or worried about something. "Teresa," he called, "are you all right? You seem worried about something." "No, Mr. Johnson, everything's fine. It's just that, well, your mother-in-law mentioned on the phone yesterday that the house should always be spotless for when she visits next month." "My mother-in-law said that?" Mr. Johnson asked, frowning. Mrs. Isabel, mother of his late wife, had always been a demanding woman, but she had never made direct criticisms of her work. Mrs. Thompson hesitated. She mentioned that some families have different patterns," the housekeeper stammered, realizing she had complicated things even further. It was at that moment that Mr. Johnson decided to investigate discreetly. That afternoon, while Lily played at the neighbor's house, he took the opportunity to examine his study in more detail. Everything was in order, the books on the shelves, the documents organized, the desk clean. But something troubled him, an indefinable feeling that someone had tampered with his belongings. He approached the safe, observing the painting by Edward Hopper. It was slightly crooked, a detail that a less meticulous person might not notice. Mr. Johnson had always aligned all the paintings in the house perfectly, a habit he had developed in recent years since his wife's passing, when control over small details became a way to cope with the feeling that his life had completely derailed. "Interesting," he murmured to himself, straightening the painting. The following Monday, a seemingly insignificant incident heightened his suspicions. During lunch, Mrs. Thompson accidentally knocked over a glass of water when Mr. Johnson casually mentioned that he intended to reorganize some important documents he kept in the safe. "Be careful, Tessa," he exclaimed, quickly getting up to help clean the water that had spilled across the table. "I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. I don't know what came over me. I've been so clumsy lately," she said, visibly embarrassed. "You seem very tense. Maybe you should take a few days off. When was the last time you rested?" "You don't need to worry about me, sir. I'm fine. It's just a busy time at home, with the kids at school and everything." Mr. Johnson watched the housekeeper's face closely. Mrs. Thompson had always been an open person, unable to disguise her emotions. When she was happy, she smiled openly. When worried, she had a characteristic frown. But now, there was something different in her expression, a mix of anxiety and determination he had never seen before. That night, after putting Lily to bed, Mr. Johnson sat in his study reflecting on recent events. He picked up the phone and dialed his accountant, David, a trusted man who had been advising him for over 15 years. "David, I need you to discreetly check the company accounts. Nothing official, just a routine check." "Is there a specific problem, Mr. Johnson?" "I don't know. Maybe it's my paranoia, but I've been noticing some strange things. Small details that, on their own, mean nothing, but together. I understand. I'll take a look at the numbers tomorrow. But do you suspect anyone in particular?" Mr. Johnson hesitated before answering. Accusing Mrs. Thompson, even indirectly, felt like a betrayal of the trust he had placed in her over the years. She was the one who cared for his daughter with maternal affection, who kept the house running smoothly, who had been there during the most difficult times after his wife's death. "I'd prefer not to speculate just yet. Just check if everything is in order." After hanging up the phone, Mr. Johnson remained seated in his leather armchair, staring at the painting by Edward Hopper. For the first time in years, he questioned whether he truly knew the people in his daily life. The sense of control he valued so much began to give way to a growing unease, a painful suspicion that perhaps there were important aspects of life around him that he simply did not see. From upstairs came the soft sound of Lily's breathing as she slept. It was the only sound in the house that still completely reassured him, the only thing he had no doubts about. His daughter was his anchor in reality, proof that there was still purity and sincerity in his increasingly complex and questioning world. The first week of April brought with it the typical autumn rains, transforming the Johnsons' backyard into a silent refuge where only the sound of raindrops hitting the leaves of the century-old mango trees broke the tranquility. It was during one of those rainy mornings that Mr. Johnson made a discovery that intensified his suspicions about Mrs. Thompson. While searching for a forgotten umbrella in the service area, his eyes were drawn to a stack of books carefully hidden behind the washing machine. They were books on basic accounting, financial mathematics, and business administration, titles that definitely did not belong to the realm of knowledge necessary for domestic duties. "Fundamentals of Accounting," he read aloud, flipping through the book, which showed clear signs of heavy use. The pages were marked with highlighter, notes in the margins, and small papers serving as bookmarks. It was clearly the study material of someone very dedicated and organized. Mr. Johnson stood still for a few minutes, trying to process this discovery. Why would Mrs. Thompson be studying accounting in secret? And more importantly, why would she hide this from him, who had always been supportive of his employees' professional growth needs? When he heard her footsteps approaching from the kitchen, he quickly put the books back in their original position and grabbed the umbrella he had been looking for. Mrs. Thompson appeared at the door of the service area, carrying a basket of laundry to hang on the covered clothesline. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Did you lose something here?" "Good morning, Tessa. I was just looking for my blue umbrella. I must have left it here yesterday." "Oh, yes. It's right behind the washing machine," she said, pointing exactly to the spot where the books were hidden. "Are you going out in this rain?" "I have an important meeting downtown. And you, Tessa, do you have any plans for today?" "The usual plans, sir. Taking care of the house, preparing lunch, picking up Lily from school." Mr. Johnson observed her closely. There was something forced in her naturalness, as if she were playing a role instead of simply being herself. "And on weekends? How have you been spending your days off?" Mrs. Thompson hesitated for a fraction of a second before responding. "Oh, the usual. Taking care of my kids, the house. Sometimes I visit my friend Sarah in the Maplewood neighborhood." "The same friend you mentioned borrowing some books from?" The question caught Mrs. Thompson completely off guard. She didn't remember mentioning borrowing books, but she also couldn't deny it without seeming suspicious. "Yes. Sarah has always been very studious. She lends me some things to read." "What kind of reading?" "Romance. Those kinds of things, you know, Doctor." Mr. Johnson nodded, but his experience in negotiations alerted him to the inconsistencies in Mrs. Thompson's speech. Her growing nervousness, the way she avoided eye contact, and especially the contradiction between romance books and the technical titles he had seen earlier. That afternoon, after dropping Lily off at ballet class, Mr. Johnson decided to discreetly pass through the Maplewood neighborhood. He vaguely knew the area, a lower middle-class housing complex where many of his employees lived. Finding the friend, Sarah, wouldn't be difficult in a community where everyone knew each other. Friend Sarah's house was a simple two-story home, painted light yellow with a small porch where colorful flowers tried to brighten the grey atmosphere of the rainy afternoon. Mr. Johnson parked across the street and watched for a few minutes before deciding to approach. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Sorry to bother you. I'm Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Thompson's employer. Is she here by any chance?" Sarah, a robust woman in her 50s, looked at him with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. It was rare for employers to show up personally at their employees' homes. "Good afternoon, Doctor. No, Teresa isn't here. In fact, I haven't seen her for about 2 weeks. Why? Did something happen?" "No, nothing serious. It's just that she mentioned she came here every weekend and I was passing through the area." "Here, on weekends?" Sarah seemed genuinely confused. "Doctor, with all due respect, I think there's some mistake. Teresa works as a cleaner over in Lincoln Park on Saturdays. She told me herself that she needs to pick up extra hours to help with the kids' expenses at school." The revelation hit Mr. Johnson like a punch to the stomach. Mrs. Thompson was working other jobs on Saturdays and had lied about it. But why? And what else was she hiding? "Are you sure about that?" "Absolutely sure, Doctor. In fact, she always complains that she comes home on Saturdays dead tired. She works in a big house over in Lakeview, if I'm not mistaken." Mr. Johnson thanked her politely and returned to his car, his mind racing with questions. During the drive back home, he tried to understand why Mrs. Thompson would lie about working as a cleaner. It was perfectly honorable, and he would never criticize her for seeking extra income. In fact, he had always shown understanding for his employees' financial difficulties. Upon arriving home, he found Mrs. Thompson preparing dinner in the kitchen. She was softly humming a country song while sautéing vegetables, displaying the usual calmness that had always characterized her work. "Teresa, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, Mr. Johnson, go ahead. It's about your work here at home. Are you satisfied? Do you feel well treated?" Mrs. Thompson stopped stirring the food and turned to him, surprised by the question. "Of course I am, Doctor. You have always been very good to me and my family. Why do you ask?" I've noticed you seem a bit tense lately, and today I happened to run into your friend Sarah." Mrs. Thompson's face visibly paled. Her hands, which were holding the wooden spoon, began to tremble. Sarah?" "Yes, and she told me something interesting. She said you work as a cleaner on Saturdays. Why didn't you tell me this, Teresa?" The silence that followed was charged with tension. Mrs. Thompson lowered her eyes, took a deep breath, and finally found the courage to speak. "Mr. Johnson, I didn't want you to know, because I was afraid you would think that my salary here wasn't enough. And it is enough, yes. It's just that, well, my kids are growing up. Expenses are increasing. Teresa, I would never criticize you for working more to support your family. That's admirable. But I don't understand why you would hide it. It's just that it's complicated, Doctor. Sometimes we feel ashamed of our own situation. You have always been so generous, raising my salary every year, giving me a holiday basket, paying for the health plan. It seemed ungrateful of me to look for extra work." Mr. Johnson felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief for understanding at least part of the situation, and guilt for putting Mrs. Thompson in a position where she felt compelled to hide her struggle for survival. "You never needed to hide this from me, Teresa. I respect your effort." "Thank you, Doctor. You are very understanding." But even with this explanation, Mr. Johnson couldn't shake the feeling that there were more things being hidden. The accounting books, the envelope in the safe that Lily had vaguely mentioned, the constant nervousness. All of this formed a puzzle that was still incomplete. That night after dinner, he decided to test Mrs. Thompson's honesty one more time. "Teresa, do you happen to know anyone who studies accounting? I'm thinking of recommending a course for some employees at the company." "Accounting," she repeated, her voice rising slightly. "No, Doctor. I don't know anyone. Why do you ask?" "Nothing specific. It was just an idea." Another lie. Mr. Johnson was starting to question whether he really knew the woman who had been taking care of his home and his daughter for 8 years. The last week of April brought a twist that Mr. Johnson could never have anticipated. It was a rainy Thursday when Marina, Mrs. Thompson's eldest daughter, appeared at the Johnsons' door in the middle of the afternoon, completely soaked and with eyes shining with tears. But not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure joy and relief. Marina Smith was 17 years old and carried, with her, shoulders bearing the weight of the expectations of the entire family. Tall for her age, too skinny, a consequence of skipping meals to save money, she always maintained an elegant posture that contrasted with her simple, already faded clothes. Her curly hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her brown eyes sparkled with the sharp intelligence that had made her the top student in her school. "Is Mrs. Thompson here?" she asked Lily, who had answered the door. "Auntie, Sarah is here!" shouted Lily, running toward the kitchen. Mrs. Thompson quickly appeared, drying, her hands on a navy blue apron. Upon seeing her daughter's state, her first instinct was one of concern. "Sarah, girl, what happened? Why aren't you at school?" "Mom, I did it!" exclaimed Sarah, pulling a crumpled envelope from her soaked backpack. "I got the full scholarship, 100%, for medicine at the University of Chicago." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of rain tapping on the roof. Mrs. Thompson stood frozen, as if she couldn't process her daughter's words. Mr. Johnson, who had come down to grab a document from the study, paused halfway down the stairs upon hearing the commotion. "What do you mean, my daughter? What scholarship?" "The Student Assistance Program, Mum. Remember I filled out the socio-economic form last year? They reviewed our situation and approved it. I'm going to study medicine for free." Mrs. Thompson felt her legs weaken. She leaned against the wall, placing her hand on her chest in an attempt to control her breathing. It was everything she had dreamed for her daughter, but also the confirmation that her secret savings would be even more necessary to cover indirect costs: housing, food, transportation, books. "Mom, aren't you happy?" "Happy? My daughter, I am..." Mrs. Thompson couldn't finish the sentence before breaking down in tears. Mr. Johnson descended the rest of the stairs, touched by the scene he was witnessing. Sarah knelt beside her mother, hugging her tightly while whispering words of gratitude. "Mom, you always said I could go wherever I wanted. You never lied to me. Never." "Congratulations, Sarah," said Mr. Johnson, approaching the group. "Medicine at the University of Chicago is an extraordinary achievement. Your mother must be very proud." "Thank you, Dr. Johnson," replied Sarah, wiping her tears. "Sorry for showing up here all wet, but I couldn't wait to get home to tell her." "No worries, girl. This house is your home too," he said, surprised by the sincerity of his own words. Mrs. Thompson finally managed to compose herself, but Mr. Johnson couldn't help but notice the anxiety mixed with joy in her expression. It was as if she were mentally calculating all the expenses that lay ahead. "Sarah, explain something to me," said Mr. Johnson, driven by genuine curiosity. "To get this scholarship, did you have to prove the family's financial situation?" "Yes, doctor, it was quite rigorous. We had to present proof of income, bank statements, tax returns, everything." "And how did you manage to organize all that documentation?" Sarah glanced quickly at her mother before responding. "My mum is very organized with these things. She always kept all the important papers, made some spreadsheets to track household expenses." "Spreadsheets?" Mr. Johnson repeated, his attention sharpening. "Yeah, those basic Excel tables, you know, to note what comes in and what goes out every month." Mrs. Thompson felt her heart race. She hadn't told anyone about the basic computer classes she took on Sundays at the community school in the neighborhood, much less about how she had learned to use computer programs to better manage the family's limited finances. "How interesting," commented Mr. Johnson. "You never told me you knew how to work with spreadsheets." "Oh, doctor, it's really basic stuff. I learned a few things here and there," she murmured, avoiding looking directly at him. "Basic stuff? Nothing, Mom," protested Sarah with filial pride. "You should have seen how she organized our financial life. Every penny is noted, every expense planned. That's what helped us prove our need for the scholarship." Mr. Johnson absorbed every word, mentally piecing together an increasingly complex picture of the woman who had worked in his home for 8 years. The housekeeper he knew was revealing herself to be a much more sophisticated and determined person than he had ever imagined. "And now, what are the next steps?" he asked. "I have to enroll by May 15th. That's when the real rush begins. Finding student housing, buying books, organizing my new life." "Medical books are extremely expensive," Mr. Johnson commented, observing Mrs. Thompson's reaction. "That's true," Sarah confirmed, "but I've already researched. I can buy used ones, share with other students, use the library. We'll manage." "Of course we will," Mrs. Thompson said with a determination that surprised Mr. Johnson. "We've always managed, and we will continue to." At that moment, looking at the mother and daughter embracing in the middle of his kitchen, Mr. Johnson understood that he was facing a strength he had completely underestimated. It wasn't just maternal love. It was an unwavering determination, a carefully planned and executed strategy honed over years of silent sacrifices. After Sarah left, promising to return on the weekend to show all the scholarship documents, Mrs. Thompson returned to her tasks with renewed energy. But Mr. Johnson watched her with different eyes, noticing details that had previously gone unnoticed: the way she organized cleaning products by category and alphabetical order, how she always knew exactly when an item in the house was running low, how she kept mental lists of everything, from Lily's activity schedules to the due dates of household bills. "Tea," he said that night after dinner. "Do you need any help? With Sarah's preparations, I mean." "No, Dr. Johnson. Thank you very much, but we can manage." "I'm sure you can. You've already shown that. But sometimes accepting help isn't a sign of weakness." Mrs. Thompson stopped organizing the dishes and looked at him with an expression that mixed gratitude and wounded pride. "You've always been very generous to us, Doctor, but Sarah earned this scholarship on her own merit. I want her to continue knowing that she can achieve things through her own efforts." "I completely understand, and I agree with you." But as she finished tidying up the kitchen, Mr. Johnson couldn't stop thinking about the fundamental contradiction he had discovered. If Mrs. Thompson was as organized and capable as Sarah had revealed, why would she hide her accounting studies? Why would she lie about her weekend activities? The answer came to him like a flash of insight. Perhaps she wasn't hiding something bad. Perhaps she was protecting something good, something that could change the balance of their working relationship and that she feared losing. That night, alone in his study, Mr. Johnson looked again at the painting by Edward Hopper that covered the safe. For the first time, he considered the possibility that Mrs. Thompson was not a threat, but rather an extraordinary person he had been unable to see beyond her domestic role. The question that now tormented him was different. It was not, what was she hiding, but rather, why did she feel the need to hide who she really was? The arrival of May brought with it the characteristic chill of autumn in Indiana and the preparations for the traditional summer festivals that Mr. Johnson's company organized annually for employees and their families. It was a tradition he had inherited from his father, a way to maintain closeness with the collaborators and strengthen the bonds he considered essential for business success. The construction company's warehouse, located in a Chicago suburb, was being decorated with colorful banners, balloons, and a large artificial bonfire in the center. Mrs. Thompson had offered to help organize the buffet, a responsibility she took on every year that made her feel like an important part of the Johnson family business. "Teresa, are you sure you want to handle all this work?" Mr. Johnson asked, watching her lead a team of 5 women in preparing traditional pastries. "It's a lot for one person." "Oh, come on, Mr. Johnson. I love doing this. And the girls here help me a lot," she replied, pointing to the other employees who were chopping ingredients and preparing the large pots. Lily was running around the warehouse dressed in a country-style dress that Mrs. Thompson had sewn especially for her. The girl was ecstatic about the party, especially because Sarah was coming with her siblings, Jake and Emma, and she loved playing with them. It was during the preparations that an episode occurred that would completely change the dynamics of the situation. An elegant woman, around 40 years old, appeared in the warehouse, and Mr. Johnson recognized her immediately. It was Mrs. Smith, owner of one of the most luxurious houses in Lakeview and an occasional client of the construction company. "Mr. Johnson, what a coincidence to find you here," she said, approaching with a smile that did not hide a certain social superiority. "Mrs. Smith, what a surprise. What brings you here?" "Actually, I came to talk to one of your employees. Mrs. Thompson, right? I heard she works as a housekeeper on Saturdays, and I need someone to do a heavy cleaning at my house." Mr. Johnson felt an immediate discomfort. He didn't like it when people referred to his employees in a diminutive way, and there was something in Mrs. Smith's tone that deeply irritated him. "Teresa works here full-time, and on Saturdays she has her personal commitments." "Oh, but she does work at my friend Helen's house in Lakeview. Helen loves her. She says she is very efficient and honest. That's why I thought of hiring her too." Mrs. Thompson, who had overheard the conversation, approached with visible embarrassment. Her hands were dirty from pastry dough, and she felt completely out of place in front of Mrs. Smith's elegance. "Mrs. Smith, I already told Mrs. Helen that my Saturdays are quite busy. I can't take on more work." "But dear, I'm offering a very good rate. $200 for a Saturday. It's almost what you earn here in a week, isn't it? The silence that followed was awkward. Mrs. Thompson turned red, not knowing where to hide her face. Mr. Johnson felt a growing anger at the disrespectful way Mrs. Smith was handling the situation. "Mrs. Smith," he said, with the firm and controlled voice he used in tense negotiations, "Teresa is not a discounted product. She is a respected professional who has the right to choose her commitments." "Wow, Mr. Johnson, you don't need to get upset. It was just a proposal." "And the answer is no," intervened Mrs. Thompson, surprising everyone with the firmness of her voice. "I work where I am respected as a person, not just as labor." Mrs. Smith left shortly after, visibly disturbed by the audacity of a domestic worker. But the episode left deep marks on Mr. Johnson, who began to question how many other humiliating situations Mrs. Thompson faced regularly in her extra work. "Teresa, I'm so sorry for that embarrassing situation," he said when they were alone. "Don't worry, Doctor. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time it's happened." "What do you mean?" "Oh, some people think that because we work in family homes, we have no dignity, that they can treat us however they want, pay whatever they want, demand whatever they want." "And why do you keep doing these extra jobs?" Mrs. Thompson took a deep breath, looking at the ground before answering. "Mr. Johnson, you are a wonderful boss. You treat me well, pay on time, respect me. But even so, what I earn here only covers the basics for my family. Private school for the kids, health insurance, food, clothes. There's little left. And now with Sarah going to college, why have you never asked me for a raise? Because I know you already pay me more than the market rate. And because—" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Because I'm afraid." Mr. Johnson remained silent, absorbing the brutal honesty of those words. He realized that he had inadvertently created a dynamic where Mrs. Thompson felt trapped by her own gratitude. The summer festival took place the following Saturday and was an absolute success. Over 200 people attended, including employees, family and friends. The smell of corn pudding, tamales and hot cider filled the air, mixed with the sounds of accordion and guitar. Sarah arrived in a borrowed country dress, which looked elegant on her, like a gala outfit. Jake, at 15, couldn't tear himself away from the makeshift soccer field, while Emma, the 13-year-old youngest, helped Mrs. Thompson serve the food. It was during the festival that Mr. Johnson had the opportunity to talk more calmly with Mrs. Thompson's children. Sarah spoke passionately about her plans for medical school, demonstrating a maturity and determination that impressed everyone around. "Dr. Johnson," she said, "I want you to know that my mom speaks of you and Lily with great affection. You are like a blessing in our family's life. Your mother is the blessing for us, Sarah, and you should be very proud of her." "We are proud. You have no idea what she has done to get here. I've seen her studying until dawn, learning new things to better organize our lives." "Studying what?" "Oh, a bit of everything. Computer skills, household management, even basic accounting. She always says that knowledge is something no one can take away from us." Mr. Johnson felt a tightness in his chest. Mrs. Thompson was empowering herself, developing, fighting to grow in life, and he hadn't even noticed. Worse, she felt compelled to hide this from him. At the end of the festival, when everyone had already left and only a few employees remained to help with the cleanup, the episode occurred that would definitively change the course of events. Lily, tired and sleepy, was sitting on Mrs. Thompson's lap when, without any malice, she made a comment that chilled the employee's blood. "Auntie, remember that day you put the paper in Dad's safe? Why were you so scared?" The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Thompson turned pale, while some nearby employees exchanged curious glances. Mr. Johnson felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. "What's safe, Lily?" asked Mr. Smith. the company accountant who was helping organize the chairs. "Dad's office safe. Aunt T put a paper in there and got nervous. I saw." The gossip spread quickly among the present employees. Within minutes, distorted versions of the story began to circulate. Teresa tampering with the boss's safe, papers being hidden, suspicious behavior. Mrs. Thompson abruptly stood up, nearly knocking Lily over. "Dr. Johnson, I can explain." "Not here, Teresa. We'll talk at home on Monday." The rest of the night passed in a blur. Mrs. Thompson helped finish the cleanup in silence, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Sarah tried to find out what had happened, but her mother only said it was a misunderstanding that would be resolved. On Sunday, Mr. Johnson couldn't get the situation out of his head. Lily's innocent observation had opened a Pandora's box that could destroy Mrs. Thompson's reputation and jeopardize 8 years of mutual trust. For the first time since the suspicions began, he wondered if he really wanted to uncover the truth. Because now, knowing better the extraordinary woman that Mrs. Thompson had revealed herself to be, he feared that the truth could be more painful for him than for her. The Monday following the summer festival dawned with palpable tension in the Johnson household. Mrs. Thompson arrived promptly at 7 in the morning, as always, but her demeanor was visibly different. Her shoulders were tenser, her usual smile had vanished, and she avoided any unnecessary eye contact with Mr. Johnson. Lily, for her part, immediately sensed that something was wrong in the atmosphere. The 6-year-old had that heightened sensitivity typical of children who lost a maternal figure. Early, she had learned to read between the lines of adults, to pick up on the tension signals that preceded significant changes in her life. "Good morning, Aunt T," she said, hugging Mrs. Thompson's legs as she did every morning. "Good morning, my princess," the employee replied, but her voice sounded forced, as if she were playing a role. Mr. Johnson went downstairs for breakfast with a heavy feeling in his stomach. He had spent the entire Sunday reflecting on the situation, oscillating between the need to protect his assets and the reluctance to destroy the trust he had built with Mrs. Thompson over the years. "Teresa, after Lily leaves for school, we need to talk." "Yes, Dr. Johnson, I know." Breakfast passed in awkward silence. Lily tried to lighten the mood with her childhood stories about the summer festival, but neither her father nor Mrs. Thompson could show their usual enthusiasm. The girl began to worry. "Dad, did Aunt T do something wrong?" she asked with the typical frankness of children. "Why do you ask that, princess?" "Because you two are sad. And when adults are sad together, it's because someone did something wrong." Mr. Johnson and Mrs. Thompson exchanged quick glances, both touched by the girl's keen perception. "Don't worry about adult things, dear," said Mrs. Thompson, stroking Lily's hair. "Sometimes we worry about work, that's all." After the driver took Lily to school, Mr. Johnson invited Mrs. Thompson for a conversation in the study, ironically, the same place where everything had begun. She sat in the chair in front of the mahogany desk, with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes fixed on the floor. "Teresa, before we talk about what happened at the festival, I want you to know that I have a lot of respect for you and your family. These 8 years of working together mean a lot to me. They mean a lot to me too, Dr. Johnson. But I can't ignore what Lily said. Did you really tamper with my safe?" The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Mrs. Thompson took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for a plunge into unknown waters. "I did, Doctor." The simple and direct confession caught Mr. Johnson off guard. He had prepared for denials, complicated explanations, elaborate justifications, not for such a frank admission. "And what did you put in there?" "Money, Doctor, my savings." "Your savings? Why in my safe?" Mrs. Thompson finally raised her eyes and looked directly at him. Tears were forming, but there was also a steely determination that Mr. Johnson recognized immediately, the same expression he had seen on Sarah's face when she talked about medicine. Because there's no safe place in my house, Doctor, and because this money is sacred to me. Explain further. It's 6 months of savings, penny by penny. Everything left over from my salary after paying the basic bills. Everything I earn from my Saturday jobs. Every coin I find forgotten in the pockets of the clothes I wash. It's all there to pay for Sarah's college, the books, transportation, food. Mr. Johnson leaned back in his chair, processing the information. It wasn't theft. It was the opposite. It was a desperate mother using his safe as an improvised bank to protect her daughter's dreams. Why didn't you ask me to keep the money in a bank account? Because banks charge fees, Doctor. And because I was ashamed to explain that I managed to save so little in so much time. The brutal honesty of the answer hit Mr. Johnson like a punch. He had earned more money the previous week than Mrs. Thompson could save in an entire year. How much is in there? $1,200, Doctor. The ridiculously small amount made Mr. Johnson feel even worse. To him, it was equivalent to a restaurant bill. To Mrs. Thompson, it represented months of deprivation and sacrifice. Mrs. Thompson, do you understand that using my safe without permission was wrong? I do, Doctor, and if you want to fire me, I will understand that too. I just ask that you let me take my money back. No one is going to be fired, but we have a problem. What problem, Doctor? What Lily said at the party. People heard it. My accountant has already called me twice today asking if I want to conduct an internal audit. Mrs. Thompson paled. An audit would mean investigation, questioning, her reputation destroyed in the entire community of domestic workers in the area. What are you going to do? Mr. Johnson was torn. As a businessman, he knew he should follow protocols, investigate any irregularities, protect himself legally. As a person, he saw a desperate mother who had made a questionable decision for understandable reasons. I don't know yet. I need to think. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Carlos, the accountant, with a call that would completely change the course of the situation. Dr. Johnson, you need to know something. I received an anonymous call this morning. Someone said your maid is embezzling money from the company and suggested we conduct a full audit. Anonymous call? Yes, a female voice. She didn't identify herself, but she seemed to know details about the situation. Mr. Johnson looked at Mrs. Thompson, who had paled even more. The situation was spiraling out of control. Carlos, don't make any hasty decisions. Let me talk to you in person. After hanging up, he realized that Mrs. Thompson was trembling. Doctor, what is it? It seems someone who was at the party decided to cause trouble for you. Oh my God, she whispered. My children, if this story spreads, my children will be embarrassed at school, in the neighborhood. Calm down, Mrs. Thompson. We will resolve this. How, Doctor? If they conduct an audit, they will discover everything, and even if they find nothing wrong, the rumor will have already spread. Who will want to hire a maid suspected of theft? The reality of the consequences hit Mr. Johnson hard. For him, an audit was a normal business procedure. For Mrs. Thompson, it would be the complete destruction of her professional and social life. Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. You can ask. Besides the money you kept in the safe, did you tamper with anything else? Did you take any documents? Look at any papers? No, Doctor. I swear to God I didn't. I opened the safe, put my money in, closed it and left. I never touched anything that belonged to you. And why didn't you tell me about your accounting studies? Why did you hide that? Mrs. Thompson sighed deeply. Because I was afraid, Doctor. Afraid of what? Afraid you would think I wanted to leave here. Afraid of seeming too ambitious. Afraid of changing a relationship that has always worked well. The afternoon passed quickly. With Mr. Johnson trying to decide the best way to proceed. The external pressure was mounting. Carlos called 2 more times, insisting on the need for an audit to protect the company from possible future legal issues. When Lily returned from school, she found Mrs. Thompson exceptionally quiet and her father visibly worried. "Dad, why is everyone sad today?" "Princess, sometimes adults need to solve complicated problems. Is it because of what I said at the party about Aunt May and the safe?" The silence that followed confirmed the girl's fears. At 6 years old, Lily began to understand that her innocent words had triggered something much bigger and more dangerous than she had imagined. "Did I make Aunt May sad?" she asked, her eyes filling with tears. Mrs. Thompson knelt beside her, hugging her tightly. "No, my princess, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes things get complicated without anyone being to blame." But that night, when Mrs. Thompson finally left, everyone knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The secret had come out of the box, and now it remained to be seen if it would be possible to control it before it destroyed everything. What they had built together over those 8 years. The week that followed was marked by an atmosphere of growing tension that permeated every corner of the Johnson household. Mr. Johnson had managed to postpone the audit for a few days, claiming the need to better organize the documentation, but he knew he could not delay indefinitely. The pressure from David and other business partners increased each day, especially after rumors about irregularities involving domestic employees began to circulate in the business circles of Chicago. Mrs. Thompson, for her part, was living through a silent torment. She continued to carry out her tasks with her usual efficiency, but she had lost the spontaneity that had always characterized her presence in the house. Her hands trembled slightly when she served coffee. Her eyes avoided meeting Mr. Johnson's, and she had developed the habit of obsessively checking if all the doors were locked before leaving, as if fearing that something might go wrong in her absence. Sarah, noticing her mother's emotional state, showed up at the house on Wednesday afternoon, determined to find out what was happening. The 17-year-old had developed a precocious maturity that made her more observant than most adults, and she knew her mother well enough to sense that something serious was going on. "Mom, what's happening? You've been different since the summer festival." "It's nothing, Sarah. Just some work problems that will sort themselves out." "What kind of problems?" Mrs. Thompson hesitated, looking around to see if Mr. Johnson or Lily were nearby. They were alone in the kitchen, with the rainy May afternoon creating an intimate and cozy atmosphere that contrasted drastically with the tension she felt. "Sarah, do you remember when I told you I was saving money in a safe place for your studies?" "I remember. You've always been very mysterious about that." "I was saving it here in the house, in Mr. Johnson's safe." Sarah froze for a moment, processing the information. "In his safe. Mum, did you ask for permission?" "I didn't ask, Sarah, and now they've found out." The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of Mrs. Thompson's life. She explained to her daughter how she had come to that desperate decision, motivated by fear of burglaries in the neighborhood where they lived, and the absolute need to protect every penny saved for the family's future. "Mum, do you understand that this could be interpreted as theft?" "I know, my daughter. I know I was foolish, that I should have explained the situation from the beginning. But I was so afraid of losing this job." Sarah hugged her mother, feeling the weight of the responsibility she carried on her shoulders. She knew that the secret savings were all meant for her studies, for her dreams of becoming a doctor. "I'm going to talk to Mr. Johnson. I'll explain everything." "No, Sarah, this is my problem." "It's not just your problem, Mom. I'm the one who will study with that money. I'm the one who will benefit from all the sacrifices you've made." At that moment, Mr. Johnson entered the kitchen looking for a glass of water and found mother and daughter embraced, clearly emotional. The scene touched him deeply, reminding him of the intimate moments he had shared with his own wife and daughter before the tragedy that had changed his life forever. "Sorry to interrupt. Can I help with anything?" Sarah released her embrace and looked directly at him with a determination that surprised him. "Mr. Johnson, can I talk to you? It's about my mom." "Of course, Sarah." The three of them headed to the living room, where Mr. Johnson invited Sarah to sit on the couch, while Mrs. Thompson stood, visibly nervous. "Mr. Johnson, my mom told me about the situation with the money in the safe. I want you to know that it was all for my sake." "What do you mean?" "The money she was saving is for my studies. Books, transportation, meals at university. My mom works 2 jobs, studies accounting in her spare time, and saves every penny thinking about my future." Mr. Johnson listened in silence, observing the passion and sincerity in the young woman's words. There was something in the way Sarah defended her mother that reminded him of his own relationship with his father, the mix of love, respect, and determination to protect the family. "And you think that justifies using my safe without permission?" "No, sir. I know it was wrong. But I want you to understand the motivations. My mom is not dishonest. She is desperate." "Desperate?" Sarah looked at her mother, who silently nodded, giving her permission to tell the whole truth. "Mr. Johnson, do you know how much my mom earns here?" "Of course. I set the salary myself." "And do you know how much it costs to raise 3 children on a domestic worker's salary?" Mr. Johnson fell silent. It was a question he had no practical answer for, only a theoretical one. "My mom pays $300 in rent, $200 for school for me and my siblings, $150 for groceries, $100 for transportation, $80 for electricity, $60 for water, and $40 for gas. That adds up to $930 just for the basics. Her salary here is $1,200. The numbers hit Mr. Johnson like slaps to the face. He had never done those calculations, never really considered the real impact of the cost of living on his employees' budgets. "That leaves $270 a month, sir, for medicine, clothing, school supplies, any emergencies. That's why she works on Saturdays. That's why she studies accounting in secret. That's why she saves every penny as if it were gold." "Sarah," Mrs. Thompson tried to intervene. "No, Mom, he needs to know. Mr. Johnson, my mom works 14 hours a day. She leaves home at 6 in the morning and returns at 9 at night. On Saturdays, she works an additional 8 hours as a cleaner. On Sundays, she studies computer science and accounting at a community school." Mr. Johnson felt smaller and smaller as he listened to the account. The woman he had known as just his domestic worker was, in fact, a remarkable individual. In truth, a warrior fighting alone against all adversities to ensure a better future for her children. "And yet," continued Sarah, "she never complained about her salary, never asked for a raise, never arrived late or missed a single day in 8 years. Do you know why? Why? Because she's afraid, Doctor. Afraid of losing her job. Afraid of not being able to find another one. Afraid of disappointing you, who has always treated our family with respect." The silence that followed was interrupted only by the sound of rain tapping against the windows. Mr. Johnson looked at Mrs. Thompson, who had tears silently streaming down her face, but held her head high with dignity. "Teresa, why didn't you ever tell me about these struggles?" "Because I didn't want you to hire me out of pity, Doctor. I wanted you to value me for my work." "And why did you hide your studies?" Because I was afraid you would think I was wanting too much, that a domestic worker shouldn't have ambitions." The answer revealed a prejudice that Mr. Johnson didn't even know he possessed. He had truly created an environment where Mrs. Thompson felt compelled to hide her efforts for personal and professional growth. Teresa, do you have any idea how I feel, knowing that you spent 8 years hiding who you really are? What do you mean, Doctor? You are not just a domestic worker. You are a manager, an accountant, a businesswoman, an educator. You manage your home as if it were a company, raising 3 exemplary children, facing challenges that I have never had to confront. Mrs. Thompson was surprised by the words. She had never thought of herself in those terms. "And do you know what impresses me the most?" continued Mr. Johnson. "It's that you did all of this while maintaining dignity, honesty, and humility. Even when you used my safe without permission, it was for a noble reason. You're not going to fire me. Firing you would be the biggest mistake of my professional life. But we will need to resolve this audit situation." Sarah stood up, walking to the window where she observed the rain for a few seconds before turning back. "Dr. Johnson, may I suggest something? Of course. What if my mother presented a complete report on how she organizes our financial life to show that she has knowledge and competence in management?" Sarah's suggestion planted a seed in Mr. Johnson's mind. Perhaps there was a way to turn that crisis into an opportunity to publicly reveal Mrs. Thompson's extraordinary qualities instead of hiding them. "That's an interesting idea, Sarah. Very interesting." That night, after Sarah left, Mr. Johnson found himself alone in his study, looking at the safe. For the first time since the beginning of this story, he began to see the situation not as a problem to be solved, but as a revelation of his own blindness regarding the extraordinary people who were part of his daily life. The month of June arrived, bringing with it the typical cold of the Chicago winter and a decision that would completely change the course of Mrs. Thompson's life. After 3 days of intense reflection on the conversation with Sarah, Mr. Johnson made a resolution that even he did not expect. Instead of allowing the audit to destroy Mrs. Thompson's reputation, he would do exactly the opposite. On Monday morning, Mr. Johnson called David with an unusual proposal. "David, about that audit, I'm going to do something different." "What do you have in mind?" "I'm going to ask Mrs. Thompson herself to present a complete financial report on the situation. If she has accounting knowledge, as I discovered, let her prove it professionally." "Guilherme, have you lost your mind? Letting the suspect investigate herself?" "She is not a suspect, David. She is an exemplary employee whom I underestimated for 8 years, and if I'm right about her character, this report will impress everyone. And what if you're wrong? I take full responsibility for my decision." After hanging up, Mr. Johnson sought out Mrs. Thompson, who was organizing the office library, a task she performed weekly with surgical precision. "Teresa, I need to talk to you about a proposal." "Yes, Dr. Johnson. I want you to prepare a complete report on your personal finances and demonstrate how you organize your family's budget, a professional job, using your accounting knowledge." Mrs. Thompson stopped organizing the books, turning to him with a look of surprise and fear. "For what, Doctor?" "To present at the company, to show that you have real technical competence, not just domestic." "But, Dr. Keep, what if I can't do it right? What if they are disappointed?" "Teresa, you have managed a complex family budget for over 15 years. You raised 3 exemplary children on limited resources. You managed to get your daughter into medical school. Do you really think you lack competence?" The proposal left Mrs. Thompson in shock for the rest of the day. That evening, Sarah came home anxious to know how the negotiations about the audit had gone. "Mum, how was it today? Did Dr. Johnson say anything about the investigation?" "Sarah, he wants me to make a report of our accounts, a professional business to present at his company, A report? What kind of report? To show how I organize our money, how I manage to save something every month, how I plan our expenses. Sarah was silent for a few moments, processing the information. Mom, do you realize what this means? That he wants to humiliate me in front of everyone? No. It means he finally sees who you really are. He wants you to show your professional skills. But Sarah, I don't know how to do these business things. I only know how to take care of our home. Mom, stop belittling yourself. You've been making spreadsheets for 2 years. You manage income and expenses better than many administrators out there. You know how to calculate interest, make projections, find ways to cut costs without compromising the essentials. On Tuesday, Mrs. Thompson arrived at work with renewed determination. She asked for permission to use the office computer during her lunch hours, and she started working on the most important report of her life. The first challenge was to organize all the necessary documentation. Mrs. Thompson had meticulously kept all the expense receipts from the last 3 years. A habit she developed when she realized she needed to have total control over every penny. Grocery receipts, school tuition payment confirmations, utility bills. Everything was neatly filed in folders made from covered shoeboxes. "Teresa," said Mr. Johnson, finding her surrounded by papers at the kitchen table. "Do you need any help with the computer?" "No, Doctor. I'm managing. I'm just nervous because I've never done anything this important before." "You do important things every day. Managing a family is as complex as running a business." "Do you really think so?" "I'm sure. A business has separate departments. Finance, human resources, planning. You do all of that on your own at home." Mr. Johnson's words gave Mrs. Thompson a completely new perspective on her own skills. For the first time in her life, she began to see her household and family tasks as legitimate professional competencies. Over the next 3 days, she worked tirelessly on the report. She created detailed spreadsheets showing the evolution of the family budget over the past years, graphs demonstrating how she managed to reduce expenses without compromising quality of life, and financial projections for the next 5 years, including the costs of Sarah's college and the other children. The work revealed surprising aspects of her financial management. Mrs. Thompson had managed to reduce food expenses by 20% over 2 years simply by planning her shopping better and taking advantage of promotions. She had negotiated discounts on school tuition by offering cleaning services in exchange for reductions. She had managed to maintain an emergency fund equivalent to 3 months of expenses, even with a tight budget. "Sarah," she said on Thursday night, showing her nearly finished work, "do you think it's good?" Sarah examined the spreadsheets with the eyes of someone who had taken preparatory courses for college entrance exams and knew how to recognize technical quality. "Mom, this is better than many college projects I've seen. It's really professional." "Am I not exaggerating? Won't they think it's too pretentious?" "Mom, you're showing the truth. And the truth is that you're a natural manager." On Friday, Mrs. Thompson finished the report with a conclusion that surprised even her. She wrote about the importance of financial education for low-income families, how proper planning can transform realities even with limited resources, and about her dream of one day being able to help other families organize their financial lives. "Done," she said to Mr. Johnson, handing him a meticulously organized folder. "Here it is. Are you sure you want to do this, Teresa? Present this to the company team?" "I'm scared, Doctor, but I'm also proud of what I've managed to do with my family. If this can help clear my reputation..." "It goes far beyond clearing your reputation. This could open doors you can't even imagine." Over the weekend, Mr. Johnson read the report 3 times. With each reading, his admiration for Mrs. Thompson grew exponentially. The document was not only technically competent, it was inspiring. It showed a woman who had turned limitations into opportunities, who had created creative solutions to complex problems, who had maintained dignity and hope even in the most difficult situations. "Lily," he said to his daughter on Sunday morning, "did you know that Aunt May is very smart?" "Of course, Dad. She knows a ton of things. Why are you asking that?" "Because sometimes adults take a long time to realize what children already know." The following Monday, Mr. Johnson scheduled a meeting with the entire administrative team of the company. David, the accountant, arrived prepared to discuss the results of a traditional audit. Instead, he found Mrs. Thompson sitting at the conference table, dressed in her best business attire, holding a folder and trying to control her nerves. "Everyone," Mr. Johnson began, "I want to present to you a work that will change our perspective on personal financial management, and who will present it is none other than Teresa." The silence in the room was palpable. Everyone knew Mrs. Thompson as the family's housekeeper, but no one expected to see her in a business meeting presenting technical work. "Mrs. Thompson," David said with barely concealed skepticism, "Mr. Johnson said you prepared some sort of report?" "Yes, Mr. David. About how I manage my family's finances." What happened in the next 40 minutes would forever change how everyone in the room viewed Mrs. Thompson, and perhaps how she viewed herself. Mrs. Thompson's presentation in the conference room of Johnson Construction started hesitantly, her voice slightly trembling as she connected her USB drive to the projector. The 6 executives present, David the accountant, 2 engineers, the human resources director, and 2 minority partners, watched her with a mix of curiosity and barely concealed skepticism. "Good morning," she began, nervously smoothing her navy blue blouse that she had bought especially for the occasion. "My name is Teresa Smith. I have worked for Mr. Johnson's family for 8 years, and, well, I will present how I organize my family's finances." The first spreadsheet that appeared on the screen made an immediate impact. It was a colorful and meticulously organized graph showing the evolution of the family budget over the last 3 years, with clear divisions between income, fixed expenses, variable expenses, and savings. "Our family income is $1,850 per month," she said, gradually gaining confidence. $1,200 from my salary here at the company, $400 from extra work on Saturdays, and $250 from a government benefit for Jake, who had respiratory problems when he was little. David leaned forward, examining the numbers with professional attention. The organization was impeccable, following accounting standards that many small businesses could not maintain. "With this income," Mrs. Thompson continued, "I support 3 kids, pay for private school for all 3, maintain a family health plan, and still manage to save an average of $200 a month." "How?" asked Sandra, the HR director, genuinely interested. "Planning, Dr. Sandra. Everything is planned." The second screen displayed a grocery shopping spreadsheet that impressed everyone. Mrs. Thompson had catalogued prices of basic products in 5 different stores, creating a rotating shopping system that took advantage of each location's promotions. "For example," she explained, "I always buy rice and beans at the wholesale store during the second half of the month when they have a sale. I wait for the pharmacy specials for cleaning products. I buy meat directly from Mr. Johnson's butcher shop, who gives me a discount because I've been a customer for 6 years. One of the minority partners, Robert, whispered to his colleague, "My wife should learn this." "And how do you keep track of all this?" asked David. "I have a notebook where I record all expenses, and then I transfer it to the computer once a week. Every purchase must have justification. Is it necessary, urgent, or an investment?" The third screen revealed something that left everyone speechless: a long-term investment plan for the education of her 3 children. Mrs. Thompson had calculated the estimated costs of college entrance exams, materials, transportation, and university meals for each one, projecting financial needs until 2030. Sarah will need approximately $500 a month during her 6 years of medical school. Jake wants to study engineering, so it will be $550 for 5 years. Emma hasn't decided yet, but I reserved $600 for 6 years in case she chooses something more expensive. Mrs. Thompson, interjected Engineer Paul, do these calculations take inflation into account? Yes, Dr. Paul. I used an average of 6% per year based on the last 10 years. The silence in the room was now one of admiration, not skepticism. Mr. Johnson observed his colleague's transformation with growing satisfaction. The woman he had underestimated for 8 years was demonstrating skills that many educated professionals did not possess. And how do you manage to save with such a tight income? Asked Sandra. Strategy, doctor. For example, instead of buying new clothes, I learned to sew and alter. Instead of paying for a gym, I walk in the park and exercise at home. Instead of eating out, I plan the week's menu and creatively use leftovers. The fourth screen showed something unexpected, a social project that Mrs. Thompson had informally developed in her neighborhood. I started teaching other mothers how to organize their household budgets. Once a week, we meet at the church, and I show them how to create basic spreadsheets, how to research prices, and how to save without going without. How many families participate? Asked Robert. We started with 5. Now there are 15. And it's working, Doctor. Friend Sarah managed to save $300 in 2 months just by changing her shopping habits. Mr. Johnson felt a growing pride as he watched Mrs. Thompson transform before everyone's eyes. The shy employee had become a confident financial consultant, presenting data clearly and answering technical questions accurately. The fifth and final screen contained a proposal that no one expected. Dr. Johnson, thinking about what I've learned over the years, I would like to propose something for the company. What do you have in mind, Teresa? A financial education program for the employees. Many people earn well, but don't know how to organize their money. I could give monthly lectures, teach how to create basic spreadsheets, and show how to save for important goals. The proposal caused a buzz in the room. David looked at Mr. Johnson with an expression that mixed surprise and genuine interest. Mrs. Thompson, he said, do you have the technical training for this? I'm finishing my accounting technical course. Dr. David, and I have 15 years of practical experience managing tight budgets. When do you finish the course? Asked Sandra. In December of this year. And after that, what are your plans? Mrs. Thompson took a deep breath before answering, gathering the courage to verbalize a dream she had kept for years. I would like to open a small financial consulting office for low-income families, to help people like me organize their lives, achieve their dreams without going into debt. The silence that followed lasted almost a full minute. Finally, Robert broke the quiet. Guilherme, this woman is a diamond in the rough. How did you keep her hidden for 8 years? I didn't keep her hidden, Mr. Johnson replied honestly. I simply wasn't seeing. After the meeting, which ended with spontaneous applause from the entire team, Mr. Johnson invited Mrs. Thompson for a private conversation in his office. Teresa, do you have any idea of the impact you made in there? I hope it was positive, Doctor. More than positive. It was inspiring. David is already wanting to hire you as a consultant for the company. What do you mean? He wants you to develop a financial education program for all the employees of the construction company. A side job, well paid. Mrs. Thompson fell silent, processing the information. 8 hours ago, she feared being fired for misconduct. Now she was being invited for a consulting position. And what about the money from the safe? What money? Mr. Johnson asked with a smile. "I only see an exemplary employee who had the intelligence to use a safe to protect her savings for her daughter's education. You're not going to tell anyone about this?" "I will tell. I will tell that you are a dedicated mother, a natural manager, and an upright person who deserves all the opportunities life can offer." That afternoon, when Lily came home from school, she found Mrs. Thompson with a sparkle in her eyes that she hadn't seen in weeks. "Aunt May, why are you so happy?" "Because today I learned that sometimes people are better than we imagine, my princess. Dad is happy too. He said you're very smart. And you always knew that, didn't you? Of course, you teach me a lot of things. Why do adults take so long to learn?" The observation. The innocence of Lily made Mrs. Thompson laugh, for the first time in weeks. That night, she called Sarah with news that would change the course of their lives. "Sarah, my daughter, you won't believe what happened today." On the other end of the line, Sarah listened as her mother recounted the day's events with growing emotion. When Mrs. Thompson finished telling about the consulting proposal, there was a long silence. "Mum," Sarah finally said, "do you realize that your life changed completely today?" "Changed how?" "You left the house this morning as a domestic worker and came back this afternoon as a financial consultant." "But I'm still the same person, Sarah." "That's exactly what's most amazing, Mom. You've always been that person. You just needed someone to see it." And that night, for the first time in a long time, Mrs. Thompson went to sleep, dreaming not only of her children's future, but also of her own, a future that finally seemed as promising as she had always known it could be. A year after discovering the envelope in the safe, the Johnson home in the Maplewood neighborhood had transformed into something none of those involved could have anticipated. It was a March morning in 2024, and the sun filtered through the same linen curtains, creating the same golden patterns on the polished wooden floor. But everything else had changed profoundly. The old service area, which had previously housed only the sink and washing machines, had been converted into a small shared study. 2 work desks occupied the space. One where Mrs. Thompson attended her first clients of the United Family Financial Consulting, a name she had proudly chosen, and another where Lily, now 7 years old, did her homework under the loving supervision of Aunt May. "Mrs. Johnson," Mrs. Thompson said to a middle-aged woman sitting across from her, "let's see together how we can organize your budget so you can make your dream of renovating your home come true." The client, a cleaner who had heard about Mrs. Thompson's services through the neighborhood's informal referral network, nervously held a plastic bag full of crumpled papers, bills, receipts, notes on napkins. "Mrs. Thompson, I don't even know where to start. It feels like the money disappears before I even see it." "We'll find out where it's going and how to make it stretch further. Leave it to me." Watching the scene from the doorway, Mr. Johnson felt a deep satisfaction that went far beyond paternal pride. There was something profoundly right about that transformation, as if the universe had finally aligned the way it always should have been. Sarah was in the kitchen, preparing a snack for everyone. It had become a tradition for her to show up on Saturday afternoons to help her mother and catch up on college news. The 18-year-old was in her second semester of medical school at the University of Chicago, and her face radiated the confidence of someone who knew she was on the right path. "Dr. Johnson," she said, approaching with a tray of coffee and homemade cookies, "did you see my mum's numbers from last month?" "I did. 23 families served. That's impressive. And all with positive results. Mrs. Rosa managed to pay off her credit card debt in 6 months. Mr. Antonio saved up to buy a motorcycle for his delivery job. Ms. Silmara started a savings plan for her daughter's college." The achievements of Mrs. Thompson's clients had become a reason for celebration for the entire Johnson family. Each success story was shared during dinners, creating an atmosphere of hope and possibility that inspired everyone. "And how are your studies, Sarah?" "Very well. My grades are great, and I've made friends with my classmates. There's an extension project I want to participate in, medical care in underserved communities." "It seems you two have the same calling to help people." "I learned from the best teacher," Sarah said, looking affectionately at her mother. Jake ran in from school, still wearing his soccer uniform. At 16, he had become a tall and athletic young man, but he retained the same sweetness that had always characterized him. "Mom! Aunt May!" he shouted, using the affectionate term that Lily had invented and that the whole neighborhood had adopted. "I passed another round of the club tryouts." "That's wonderful, my son," exclaimed Mrs. Thompson, momentarily interrupting the consultation to hug her son. "And Jake," Mr. Johnson asked, "have you decided which college you want to attend?" "I'm thinking about physical education, Dr. Johnson. I want to teach and coach the kids in the neighborhood." "Excellent choice. And Emma?" "Oh, Emma is in her artistic phase," laughed Sarah. "Now she wants to be a designer. Last week she wanted to be a veterinarian. Last month it was architecture." Emma appeared at the door just then, as if she had overheard the conversation. At 14, she had inherited her mother's creativity and the family's determination, channeling it all into artistic projects that impressed teachers and peers. "I heard you talking about me," she said, pouting. "And for your information, Sarah, design is a serious decision. I'm going to design beautiful and functional furniture for families like ours." "That's lovely, dear," said Mrs. Thompson. "Each of you is following your path, but all with the same goal, to make a difference in people's lives." The consultation ended with Mrs. Johnson leaving the house with a detailed financial plan, a personalized spreadsheet, and most importantly, a renewed hope that it would be possible to realize her dreams. It was the 23rd transformation that Mrs. Thompson had facilitated since opening her consulting office 6 months earlier. "Lily," Mr. Johnson said to his daughter, who was finishing her homework, "do you remember that day when you saw Aunt May working on the safe?" "I remember, Dad." "Why? Did you imagine that would lead to all of this?" he asked, gesturing to the makeshift office, to the gathered family, to the environment of hope and possibility, the harmony and growth that had been established. "No," she replied with the typical honesty of children, "but I knew Aunt May was special. I just didn't know why the adults couldn't see it." The answer made everyone laugh, but it also provoked a moment of silent reflection. How many extraordinary people passed through their lives every day, masked by social roles that limited the perception of who they really were. "Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Johnson said, "can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Dr. Johnson. Are you happy with this new life with all these changes?" Mrs. Thompson stopped organizing the papers from the last consultation and looked around. She saw Sarah studying medicine, Jake planning to be a teacher, Emma designing creative projects, and Lily doing homework with concentration. She saw the small study where she was building her financial independence by helping other families. She saw Mr. Johnson, who had evolved from a respectful boss to a true friend and supporter of her dreams. "Dr. Johnson, for a long time, I thought happiness was something that happened to other people. People with more money, more education, more opportunities. Today I understand that happiness is when you can be who you really are and still help others discover who they truly are. And who are you really, Teresa? I am a mother who loves unconditionally. I am a woman who is not afraid to work hard. I am a person who believes that everyone deserves the chance to dream and to make those dreams come true. And I am someone who has learned that hiding who we are never works for long." That afternoon, when everyone gathered for the traditional Saturday snack, Mr. Johnson made an announcement that moved everyone. Everyone, I have news. The construction company is going to sponsor a microcredit program for small entrepreneurs in the area. And who will coordinate the financial education program that accompanies the loans is our Teresa. The silence was broken by shouts of joy and applause. Mrs. Thompson was left speechless, tears streaming down her face. This means, Mr. Johnson continued, that in addition to your private practice, you will be able to help many more families, and with a salary that will allow total independence for you and your children. Dr. Johnson, she began. No more doctor. I think it's time for you to call me just Mr. Johnson. We are partners now, right? Mr. Johnson, she said, testing the name. Thank you for seeing in me what I didn't even know existed. Thank you, Teresa, for teaching me that the most extraordinary people are sometimes right under our noses, just waiting for someone to have the humility to really look. Lily got up from the table and ran to the old safe, now transformed into a filing cabinet for Mrs. Thompson's practice documents. Aunt May, she said, affectionately tapping the safe door. Remember when you put your dream in here? I remember, my princess. Now your dream is spread all over the house, throughout the neighborhood, in the lives of so many people. It's as if the safe had exploded with so much good. The poetic observation of the 7-year-old girl perfectly captured what had happened. The secret that Mrs. Thompson had hidden in the safe had not only changed the fate of that house, it had multiplied, creating waves of transformation that spread far beyond the walls of the mansion in Maplewood. As the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in orange hues that reflected in the windows of the house, everyone remained seated around the table, aware that they were experiencing something special, a family that had formed not by blood ties, but by the even stronger bonds of mutual understanding, true respect, and the ability to see the extraordinary in the seemingly ordinary. The envelope that Mrs. Thompson had hidden in the safe 18 months ago contained much more than money. It contained hope, determination, maternal love, and an unwavering faith that the future could be different from the present. And when it was finally discovered, it didn't destroy anything. On the contrary, it built a new world where each person could be valued for who they truly were, not for what they appeared to be. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and if you watched until here, comment, I watched until here, and share your opinion about this story, And don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen because it's very exciting.